You're listening to the weekly Parsha Podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramabish Yisro 5779, 2019. This week's Parsha is Parshas Yisro, and our Parsha contains the Aseret Adibros, the 10 Commandments that God spoke openly with the Jewish people. They were able to hear God's voice, and God commanded those 10 Commandments, the fourth of which I'd like to speak about. I'd like to share with you a thought from Reb Chaim Friedlander. Zachar es Yom Shabbos l'kadsho. The verse tells us, remember the Sabbath to make it holy. Sheshes yomim ta'avoid, work for 6 days, and do all of your work. V'yom hashvi Shabbos l'Hashem lekecha. The seventh day, Saturday, is a day of the Sabbath. It's a day of rest for Hashem. Don't do any work. Malacha here means conscious creative acts. Turning on a light is also a malacha. Atov vincha uvitecha. You, your sons, your daughters, your servant, your maidservant, your animals, and the stranger who lives in your gates. Because it took 6 days for God to create the heavens and the earth, the seas and all that live in them. God rested on the seventh day of creation. And therefore God blessed the day of the Sabbath and He made it holy. So we have this amazing concept of Shabbos, of the Sabbath, and God commands the Jewish people to keep the Sabbath. It's a special sign between God and the Jewish people. Only the Jewish people keep the Sabbath on Saturday, as is prescribed in the Torah. This is a special covenant between the Jew and God. A non-Jew who keeps the Sabbath is actually liable for death. So it's a special thing for the Jewish people. What is the idea behind it? What is the concept of Shabbos? What does it teach us? We see very clearly it reminds us of creation, of the fact that God rested on the seventh day. God created the entire world in 6 days, and the seventh day He rested. And I'd like to look at what is the concept behind Shabbos. And Reb Chaim Friedlander points out something which is fundamental. In last week's Parsha, he also speaks about our verses, but he speaks about some of the verses in last week's Parsha, which is where the concept of Shabbos is mentioned in the context of the Manna. The Manna was a special manna which God gave to the Jewish people throughout their 40-year wandering through the wilderness. And in that time, every single day, like clockwork, the Manna would fall, the manna would come, and that's what they would eat each and every day. That was their bread. And we see it like this. So he brings like this. I'd like to read it for you inside. The first command that the Jewish people received when they left Egypt, which is also mentioned in the 10 Commandments, Shabbos was the commandment to keep the Sabbath. Interestingly, the command came as the manna was falling for the Jewish people in the wilderness. This is what it says. This is in Exodus chapter 16, verses 22 and 23. It was on the 6th day, Laktu lechem mishne, shnei ha'omer le'echad. Whereas on the previous days, no matter how much they collected, no matter how little they collected when they came home and they opened the box, there was exactly one omer per person, a certain measure per person of the manna. When it came to Yom HaShishi, when it came to the 6th day of the week, when they collected on Friday, even though they collected the same amount, when they came home, there was a double portion. So the princes of each tribe came and they told Moses that this is what happened. It was unexpected. Rashi explains, they asked him, what's going on here? Why do we get a double amount? Why did we get a double portion? And we see from here that Moses had not yet told them about Shabbos, about the Sabbath, and that the manna would not be falling, the manna would not fall on the Sabbath. Miyad la'achar mikein, amar lehem es mitzvahs haShabbos. Immediately afterwards, so they were told the commandment of Shabbos. Su asher diber Hashem, Shabbosin Shabbos kodesh l'Hashem machar. This is what God said, that tomorrow is going to be a day of rest. It will be a time when you cannot collect the manna. It will be a time that you can't collect the manna. Can't be involved in your parnasa, your livelihood, and therefore you need a double portion on Friday. which is going to be used, part of which will be used for Shabbos. So what is the idea, what is the connection, Reb Chaim Friedlander wants to know, between the manna, and Shabbos? Why is it that the command comes? Hashem puts it in Moshe's mind, perhaps we could say, to talk to the Jewish people, to reveal, to give them the command of Shabbos in regards to the manna. What is the idea here? What is the concept? And why is it indeed that the manna does not fall on Shabbos? Why can't they collect the manna on Shabbos? What's the idea? So let's see, because there's more to this, he says. Already in Parshas, in Genesis, chapter 2, verse 3, we find that the verse tells us that God blessed the seventh day and he made it holy. He made it holy all the way at the beginning of time, all the way at the beginning of creation. What does it mean that he made it holy? And what does it mean that he blessed it? Rashi says, Baruch b'man. He blessed it that when it came to the manna, shekol yemais hashavua yored lahem amar l'gilgailas, all of the days of the week, so they would each receive this precise amount of an omer per person. Ubashishi lechem mishna. On the sixth day, they would receive a double portion. So there was a blessing that came on Friday because of Shabbos. So there was a bracha, a blessing in regards to Shabbos, which was a double portion on Friday. And there was a kiddush, there was a sanctification of Shabbos. What was the sanctification? That the manna would not fall at all on the Sabbath. And the verse is telling us that God, at the beginning of creation, connected a blessing to Shabbos and made it holy. It's speaking about something that's going to be manifest in the future in regards to the manna. It's an amazing thing that already from the time of creation, there was already a connection between Shabbos and the manna. He says clearly the foundational concept of Shabbos and the foundational concept of the manna are interlocked, are interdependent, and therefore they were given together. These two concepts were given at the same time. So he points out, clarifies, there are two portions, two different concepts here. There's a blessing that comes. This is the influx of blessings of Shabbos, which causes the entire week to be even more blessed than if one would not keep Shabbos. And it's expressed, it comes to expression in the fact that as a result of Shabbos, or in honor of Shabbos, the Jewish people would receive a double portion on Friday. By Kadesh, there's also an aspect of making it holy, sanctifying the day. Besides for an additional blessing, which is a positive thing, there's a active thing that's going on. Yishba gam kedusha. There's also an aspect of holiness that goes on. What is the concept of kedusha, of holiness? Hafrasha v'havdala, separation. Ein kesher in gashmias. Something happens on Shabbos, which is that we become separate from the physical realm. We become disconnected from our physical selves. We become more connected to the spiritual. Right? The blessing that comes is on the physical aspects. The blessings manifest themselves as a double portion on Friday. But the kedusha of Shabbos, the holiness of Shabbos, means that there's something that we are more separated from the physical. The way that it was manifest, this kedusha, this holiness, this detachment from the physical, was that the manna didn't come down on Shabbos. How does it work for us? What's special about Shabbos for us when it comes to this aspect of Kedusha? We don't work on Shabbos. We're not involved in our livelihood on Shabbos. We separate ourselves from the physical on Shabbos. So what is the idea here? So he wants to give us a bit about the essence of Shabbos. So he says, let's talk about the rest of Shabbos. The concept that we rest upon the Shabbos. What is the idea? We find that Hashem rested on Shabbos, right? In Genesis, after working so hard, as it were, for 6 days, creating the entire universe. So then Hashem rested on Shabbos. God completed on the seventh day the work that He did. Kasha. What is going on here? It says that He finished on the seventh day. It's not true. He already completed the work on Friday. Shabbos, He didn't do anything, as it were. First Rashi, the world had this concept of action, it had this concept of creation, it had this concept of work. What was missing was the concept of rest. Ba Shabbos, ba Menucha. What did Hashem create on the seventh day? Hashem created the concept of rest. And that was the completion. That was the final makeh b'patish. It was the final hammer blow of creation. Was I created the concept of work, I created the concept of action, of being involved in creation, and I also Hashem created the concept of menucha, of not creating, of resting. What's added, what's new, is the rest of Shabbos. This isn't just a lack of work. That's not what menucha is. Menucha is a positive thing. It's something which is we could say almost active. We'll see what that means. This is what brought the creation to perfection, was the concept of menucha. What was missing in the world? Menucha, rest. Ba Shabbos, ba menucha. Now Shabbos came and rest came. And that was the end, the completion. Through the rest that God did, through this stopping from creation, that's what completed creation. Yesh lahavin, says Reb Chaim Friedlander, the obvious question: Ma yitzira yesh b'menucha? How can we talk about a creation when it comes to rest? Kum yeshiva be'afes ma'isa v'i asiyah yitziri, doing nothing. That's a creation. What's the idea? In our Parsha, when it comes to the command to keep Shabbos, what does it say? On the Ten Commandments. You work for 6 days and do all of your work. The seventh day, rest. It's a day of rest for Hashem your God. We could ask a question. It's a straightforward question. Perhaps it's even obvious. I have to work 6 days and then I have to rest? Why? What's the connection? What if I don't work during the 6 days? What if I'm on vacation? Then I don't have to rest on Shabbos? We see that somehow the 6 days of work are connected, related, essential to the menucha, the rest that we do on Shabbos. Hoketzad, how does this work? We need to understand. We also need to understand the language of the verse. It says, you shall do all of your work. What? I can do all of my work in those 6 days? What does it mean? Let's say I have a certain project. I want to complete it. It's a project that takes me a month or a year, right? So what does it mean? I shall do all of my work. That almost sounds like I'm going to be completing the work. Is that true? Can I complete the work in the 6 days? It's true. When Shabbos comes, if you're working, so you stop. Well, so you didn't necessarily complete it. Shabbos is over, he will continue with his work. So how can we say, you shall do all of your work? You shall complete it? Rashi explains something amazing. When Shabbos comes, it needs to feel to you like you've already completed all of your work. On Shabbos, we don't even think about our work. All the things that we've been involved in throughout the week that have taken up all of our energies, all of our emotional energy, all of our mental capacity. On Shabbos, we let it go. We don't think about it. We're not involved in it. We're not trying to work out what's my next move, what's my next step. Shabbos, we stop. We stop. On Shabbos, it's like everything is done. I've already reached the goal. I don't have to work on it anymore. There's nothing to think about. That's the creation of Shabbos. That's what he's trying to say. That's the creation. It's a new thing. It's something amazing, something new here that's going on. It's that even though I'm in the middle of something, menucha, I don't need to think about it. I don't need to be involved in it. On Shabbos, it's not enough to not act. Person needs to also rest from any thought. Not to be involved in any thinking about the work that he's doing. And even though, if we look at it from the halachic perspective, just thinking about it without speaking about it is permitted. It's not considered a prohibition. It's not the true menucha of Shabbos. The true rest of Shabbos is I'm not involved. I'm not even thinking about it. He brings from the Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, Siman Shin Vav, Seif Ches. What does it mean according to this? When it says in the verse, 6 days you shall work. The rest of Shabbos means, what is it that we're doing on Shabbos? We're resting from those 6 days. It's all the work that we did on those 6 days is done as far as we're concerned on Shabbos. Shabbos is when we are done with our work. Even if it's not done, we are done with our work. How is it possible to get to such a level? Where I don't think about it, I'm involved in what's my next step, what's my next move. He has to stop in the middle. Person is involved in his work. He's in the middle of all the different things that he's involved in. He's in the middle of telephone calls, etc. How do you just stop? How can you just stop thinking about it? So our sages gave us an idea. They gave us some advice. It needs to be in your eyes as if it's completed already. Imagine for yourself, you already finished the business dealing. You're in the middle of work and they're knocking on your door. You have to think in your head as if you've finished it already. What is this advice? What are they trying to say? You're supposed to imagine that I finished already? I'm not in the middle of it? How do you do that? Let's try to understand the depth of what our sages are telling us. In order to get down to the foundational concept, or the secret behind the resting of Shabbos. The verse tells us, he rested on the 7th day. The Sforno tells us that when Hashem rested on the 7th day, or when we're, right, this is in our Parsha, right? It says Hashem rested. We rest. Why? Because Hashem rested. Because everything was done. Everything that was necessary in order to bring us to the goal, it was done. When is a person at rest? When a person is finished. When a person is involved, when he's in the middle, so his mind is full of all the things that he needs to do, all the things that he needs to complete. So he's not going to be able to rest properly. He's not done. He's in the middle. He still hasn't gotten to his goal. We see it's not enough to have an external, superficial level of quiet, of menucha, of rest. There needs to be an internal sense of rest, which comes because a person recognizes that he's completed. That's the true menucha. Only so is it possible for a person to reach that perfection, that completion, that goal. How do we see? We see from Shabbos itself. Hashem completed the entire creation. All that was necessary to bring the world to its completion. This is the root of Shabbos. This is the example for us of what Shabbos is supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like, I'm done. I'm really done. Okay? So to read it inside I can't do, to read the answer, but what I can give you is a tamsit, the essence of what he says. And that is that the idea here that we see here is that we think that we are in charge of the results. We think that we are in charge of the results when it comes to our actions. We're involved in creating things, in doing our business, in bringing in the parnasa. We're very involved in this shtadlus. And there's two shitas, which I won't get into, but one of the opinions is that you don't need to do any shtadlus. Okay? We won't get into that. You can listen to my Shara Bitachon podcast if you want to hear about that, the second group of those podcasts. The first group speaks about the Chavis Halavovis, who holds that we need to do hishtadlus, we need to put in efforts in order to get our livelihood. That's a gzera from Hashem. We need to be involved. But now the question is, when I'm doing those things, is it me doing it? Am I actually accomplishing these things? To whom do the results belong? The hishtadlus that I do, the actions that I do, the efforts that I put in to bringing in livelihood, to bringing in the dough, so that my wife can make the bread, so we can eat, we can have bread on the table. Is that really a result of my efforts, or is that completely disconnected from my efforts? On Shabbos, we stop. We stop making any efforts. We're not involved in hishtadlus. We're not involved because what we're coming to do with Shabbos is we're coming to recognize that it's not me. That all I do, and I have to do it because it's a gzera. It's a gzera, it's a decree from heaven. Because Adam and Eve sinned. The result was that it's a gzera, it's a decree that we need to work in order to have livelihood. But the work that we do has nothing to do with our livelihood. It's just a gzera, it's just a decree. Our livelihood is decreed from God that we will have whatever we're meant to have. On Shabbos, we don't work. We're not involved in any hishtadlus, we're not involved in any actions in order to obtain our livelihood. Why? Because Shabbos is a time that we recognize that the results belong to God. The results belong to Hashem. And therefore on Shabbos we don't work. And it's counterintuitive because we haven't worked and we've reminded ourselves and we've recognized that it's all from Him, that it's all from Hashem. That's the schus. It pours out into the whole week. We get a double portion on Friday of Manna. Why? Because Shabbos we are recognizing that it's God who's doing everything for us. And it's not even our efforts to gather the Manna. And it's not even our efforts to be involved in our work that provides us with the food that we eat on Shabbos. On Shabbos everything is already prepared. This is to get that feeling like it's not us. Everything is prepared from before Shabbos. Of course, it's our wives who have prepared the food for Shabbos. But our wives are not working on Shabbos to prepare the food. We get the sense that it's not our efforts. The results, the Misha Torach B'Erev Shabbos, Yochel B'Shabbos, Chazal say. Whoever works hard on Friday will will merit to receive, to be able to enjoy the things that he's worked for on Shabbos. But Shabbos, we're not working. But Shabbos, we are receiving. And the feeling that we're supposed to take out of Shabbos is that it's not us. On Shabbos, we're meant to stop, and because we're not really supposed to be involved at all in the results. What does it mean that on Shabbos, like we saw before, that we're not involved? When Shabbos comes, everything is finished already. Why? Because throughout the week we're supposed to feel like it's already finished. All that we're doing is we're going through the motions, because we have to go through the motions. That's the decree of Hashem. We have to go through the motions, the curse of Adam. But we're just doing the motions, and it's Hashem who's in charge of the results, in charge of our livelihood, in charge of everything. That's what we feel on Shabbos as we get from Shabbos. And that is the message of the Man. The Man was something which came miraculously. They didn't actually do any, they had to collect it perhaps, but it came from heaven. It was obviously openly the revelation of the fact that Hashem was the one doing it for us. But it's not just then. It wasn't just the 40 years in the wilderness that the Jewish people were given this amazing sustenance, abundance from Hashem. It continued for the last 3,000 years until today. Each and every one of us has the same experience if we choose to view it that way. And that's what Shabbos affords us the opportunity to see and recognize that every single thing, every morsel of bread that we eat, every dollar that we earn, it seems like it's us. But Hashem wants us to remember and recognize with the Shabbos that it's not us, that it's all Him. That just like Hashem rested, we're remembering that the whole creation, everything came from God. The whole world was created. Everything that, all of the resources that we use are all in truth and in essence, they belong to God. And Shabbos reminds us of that. And Shabbos continues to remind us of that. And that's the lesson of Shabbos. So I want to bless you, and I ask you to bless me. Hashem should help us. That we should be zech, we should merit to have this recognition, to come to this recognition. To the bracha of Shabbos, the blessings of Shabbos should pour out throughout the week. And it comes, and it will come, and Hashem should help us to recognize that it comes because of the fact that we know that He's the one that's doing it for us. And yes, we make efforts, but we recognize, Hashem should help us to recognize that it's not our efforts, but rather it's all Hashem who's doing it for us every single moment. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.